So nice to see so many children here. Um, I love writing mythology, as you have guessed. That's all what I've done for most of my adult life, although I was trained to be a doctor. And somewhere along the line, stories became the best medicine. Um, but I'll restrict myself today to children's books. People always ask me, why don't you do workshops for children? And I don't. And why don't you do most sessions for children? Because I genuinely believe that the parents make the best storytellers. And my books are really for parents, not for children. I want parents to read it and share it with their child, because then that's the conversation has much more power. You can't outsource parenting to others, you know. So that's and in a world of video games, in the world where everything is about technology, I think conversations still win. And I think talking to children about and telling them about stories and celebrating enchantment. You know, people have been asking me, why is it that the current generation suddenly is interested in mythology? And I said, if you look at all the writers in mythology today in India, they're all in their 30s and 40s. All of us grew up in a time where it was all about science and logic. And in a way, our education stripped us of magic. And then something wonderful called Hogwarts came along. Yeah. And it was okay to be a magician. And it was okay to imagine oneself as a hobbit. It was okay, and suddenly you realize that the whole world is such a wonderful, magical place. Every tree can talk to you, every bird can sing to you, you can go on a date with a monkey, and it's fine. We are a plural society, everything is allowed. And that's where mythology suddenly opened up. And that's the realm of mythology, of imagination. And the stories take you into that realm of how people saw the world. What is particular about Hindu mythology is its obsession with animals. Humans are not considered specials. We are just animals with imagination. That's the only difference. We are also, all the animals are inside us. The bird is inside us, so we can take flights of fancy in any aeroplane that you like, built in any period of history. We can swim under the sea, we can walk under the ground, we can do anything that we want. And so the Puranas speak of this wonderful character called Kashyapa. And Kashyapa basically means that old turtle man. He's a turtle. Kashyap means a turtle. And why a turtle? Because turtle live forever. And so you just imagine that they were immortal. And they lived forever and ever and ever. And they said the Kashyapa was this old man and he had many wives. And one of his wives gave birth to the sky gods, the Devas. Another wife gave birth to the Asuras, who live under the earth. And the sky gods and the earth demons constantly fight with each other. There was another wife who gave birth to the Rakshasas, who live in the forest in the south. And then there was another wife who gave birth to the Yakshas, who live in the north. And as we all know, people in the north fight the south, and south always fights the north. Some people are considered developed, and others are considered developing. And they're always fighting. So the north fights the south, the east fights the west, the up fights the down. So there's fighting going all the time. And then there were the wives who created different kinds of animals. So there was Timi, who gave birth to fishes, all the creatures in the sea. There was Vinata, who gave birth to all the birds in the sky, all the birds with wings who could fly. There was Surasa, who gave birth to animals with paws. And there was Surabhi, who gave birth to the cows and all animals with hooves. And then there was Kadru, who gave birth to all serpents. So basically differentiation, different animals were born of different mothers, but they had all a common father. The gods have a common father with the animals. The demons have a common father. Humans have a common father. We are all related. Different mothers, same father. Look at the idea. So you create a world where everybody is connected yet disconnected. We are the same but different. And therefore you have these wonderful animals. You have animals that you can even imagine. You have animals like in the Odia folk tale written by Sarala Das. Sarala Das wrote this story about 700 years ago of how Arjun one day was meditating. Arjun was this great archer and he was meditating when suddenly a strange creature came up to him. And this creature had he was a composite being. It was part rooster, part peacock, part elephant, part deer, part lion, part tiger, part serpent, part human. And he looked at this strange creature. And what do we do when we look at strange creatures? We get scared. And so the first thing he did is he raised his bow, ready to shoot this strange animal. And a voice from the sky said, "What does not exist in human imagination exists in the imagination of the gods. So submit to it, worship it, appreciate difference. See this strange creature and worship it." And we are told that is the form of Krishna. It's called the Navagunjara. And when I heard this story, I found it so fascinating. This idea of so many animals being part and they all merging together to create. It's not a monster. Normally you would call such a being a monster. But you're told no, that is divinity. And every god seems to have an animal, a little pet next to him. Every animal, every god. So Shiva has a bull, Vishnu has a hawk. There is Brahma who has a swan, or is it a goose? We are not sure. Swans sound much better than goose. I'm sure goose will disagree. And then you have the goddess who rides a cat, sometimes a tiger. We are confused. Is it a tiger or a lion? Sometimes tiger, sometimes lion. So she's Sheravali on the tiger. As Durga, she has the lion. So every god needs an animal. And then there are the monkeys of Ram. And when Ram goes to the south, he has monkeys and vultures and bears. Animals are always there. They are always present. And then you start noticing something interesting. And you go deeper into these animal stories and you start seeing they're talking about human beings because, I like to ask fundamental questions, which I believe children ask parents. And they say that Shiva, the great hermit, sits on Mount Kailash. And what is Mount Kailash? It's a mountain of stone which is covered with snow. So nothing grows there. And Shiva lives there with his bull called Nandi. So child asks the mother, what does the cow eat? So mother said, shut up. I don't know. Don't ask me such tough questions. And then the father said, actually, Nandi is a bull, not a cow. And the child asked, Dad, what's the difference? And the father said, ask your mother. And the mother said, read Devdutt Patnaik's books. Anyway, since I don't want to go to a PG-13 conversation, we shall not discuss cows and bulls and what's a bullock. That gets whole new place out there. But the fact remains, Nandi is on Mount Kailash and he has nothing to eat. And you wonder that there is this great god on this mountain made of stone, covered with snow, or his bull doesn't have anything to eat. And then he gets himself a wife. And the wife rides a tiger. So there you have on Mount Kailash husband and wife. Husband has a bull, wife has a tiger. What does a tiger eat? Bulls. And you're like, is this a sense of humor? Or is that how Shiva looks at his wife? मुझे खा जाएगी. And you're looking at it and then the story gets more interesting. Shiva has a snake around his neck, a cobra. And what do cobras eat? Rats. And Ganesha, the son of Shiva, rides a rat. And suddenly you see there is a predator around Shiva's neck, and the little boy, fat, elephant-headed son is riding a tiny rat. And the rat is quivering in fear. कि मुझे खा जाएगा. And of course, everybody says, Arey, the rat is the victim, and the snake is the villain. But the snake is also quivering in fear. Because who eats a snake? A peacock. Where is the peacock? Shiva's other son. Shiva has another son called Kartikeya. And he's this virile warlord who rides a peacock. So peacock will eat the snake will eat the rat, the tiger has to eat the bull, and the bull has nothing to eat. And you're like, अच्छा यहीं से family drama शुरू होता है. This is a family drama. Who is eating whom? And now you suddenly look, and suddenly everybody looks happy in a family photograph. Have you seen the family photograph? Shiva is sitting with his wife, he has 2 sons. All of them have their independent vehicles. Tera Mercedes, mera scooter, mera bicycle. So you have got your bull, I have got my tiger. We are independent. Hum saath hain, but we are sort of independent. So great family picture. And you're wondering, why is nobody eating anybody? I mean, dinner time mein kya karte hain ye log? And then Shiva says, but in Kailash, there is no hunger. यहाँ भूख ही नहीं है. It's a land without hunger. In a land without hunger, there is no predator or prey. Nobody is consumed. Nobody is a consumer. There is no eater and eaten. Nobody eats anybody. And therefore, there is nothing to fear. There is no need for grass. There is no need for vegetation. The bull is not going to eat anything. The tiger is going to eat nothing. So the bull is never frightened. The snake is not frightened. The rat is not. There is no fear in Mount Kailash. This is a children's story. But the concept is from the Vedas. Nature is a place where the eater of eaters and eaten. Everything is consumed. Everything, the plant grows to be eaten by the herbivores. The herbivorous animals exist to eat by the carnivores. The carnivores exist to be eaten by somebody else. The humans eat everything. And ultimately, nature eats them all and turns them into elements which will be eaten by the plant again. And therefore, continuously the gods have to be fed. Bhog lagao, feed, feed, feed. It's continuous cycle of feeding. Embedded in feeding, the idea of bhog is violence. Bali jab tak nahi chadta hai, tab tak bhog nahi lagta hai. Till the bull is killed, the tiger will not eat. Till the rat is killed, the snake cannot eat. The idea of eating is violence. You want non-violence? Stop eating. Stop consuming. But it'll never happen, right? Life is about consumption. खाना भोग लगता है, इसलिए बलि चढ़ता है. That is why something is killed. And that creates karma. That's what creates karma, because every time you consume, you have taken something from nature, and nature says, give it back. And that's the cycle of life that you can't escape. And look at this concept explained in such a simple way using the image of Mount Kailas. What a simple concept. Explained, and the child understands Vedic wisdom, which everybody seems to sound as very mysterious. It's not mysterious, very simple. We were a land of farmers. You want to explain to farmers cosmic ideas. Cosmic ideas are simple ideas. Where there is life, there is hunger. Where there is hunger, there is fear. Fear of the predator, ki khana nahi milega. Fear of the prey, that I will become food. Somebody will consume me. When I consume someone, I become the predator. When I get consumed, I am the prey. I am both this and that. I shall be eaten and I shall eat because I have to stay alive. The only way to remove this is by removing hunger on Mount Kailas, where Shiva sits. No hunger. Does such a place really exist, or is it a theoretical structure, an imagination? Ki bhook hi nahi hogi, bhaya hi nahi hoga, a place where there is no hunger, where there is no fear. That's an idea. But in other places, in the day-to-day life, the deer will run scared, the tiger will run hungry. Who is the victim? Who is the villain? And that is the question. There is a story of, in the Mahabharata, of a king. One day a dove is flying and a hawk chases the dove. And the king says, "Oh my God, poor dove, let me save the dove." And the hawk says, "What have you done? You have taken my food away." Says, "Eat something else." And the hawk says, "Is it fair that to save this dove, some other dove has to die?" And then the king says, "Okay, fine, eat me, eat my own body." And the gods say, "What a great king, he's giving up his body to save the dove." And the hawk says, "How long will you continue to feed me? One day you will die. The hawk will be eaten, if not by me, by someone else. Why are you pretending that you can save the dove? Who are you trying to fool other than yourself?" Yahi prakriti hai, this is nature. I am the predator and I have to eat and I will consume the dove. Why did you decide that the dove is the victim, and why did you call me, the hawk, the villain? Because you want to be a hero. Who is the idiot in the room? Through simple animal stories, complex ideas are being presented so that everybody understands it. It looks complex, but really when you think about it, it is so simple. The various animals, look at the idea of what we call in English law of the jungle. In Sanskrit, the word for this is Matsya Nyaya, law of the fish. The small fish will be eaten by the big fish. That does not make the big fish a villain. But in our minds, when we see a big fish eating a small fish, we'll say, "Oh ho, small fish is the victim. Big fish is the villain, especially with the sharp teeth." That's exactly what the film Jaws did, no? What did Jaws do? It demonized an animal. An innocent animal was demonized. That is what Jurassic Park does. It demonizes animals who just want to eat. That is called fiction, where you start demonizing innocent animals. Humans demonize the other. The other is the animal. वो पशु है. It is an animal. But you want to turn it into a villain because you want to be seen as the hero, the savior, the martyr. That's what is happening. And we say, don't behave like an animal. But animals can't be cruel. They don't know how to be. They don't have the wherewithal to be cruel. It's humans who are cruel. We project our negative emotions onto. So you say, don't be cunning like a fox, proud like a peacock. You know, the peacock who is dancing is not proud. It just wants a girlfriend. That's all it is. वो नाच रहा है वहां पे, बिचारा. And we are calling him proud. See how the human mind corrupts everything. The purity of nature. You see, the Vedas are called Apurusheya. Apurusheya is not created by man. And whenever people use this word Apurusheya, they say it is spiritual, it is transcendental. No, it means it is natural, not human. When humans are taken away, Apurusheya, when you remove all human beings, what is left? Nature, Prakriti. Veda is the knowledge of nature. See nature. What did the Rishi do? What does Rishi mean? जो दृष्टि जिसके पास है, he who sees. What does he see? He's sitting in a forest and what does he see? He sees the trees growing. He sees animals running. That's all he's doing. He's an observer. The observer is a Rishi. He saw the tree growing and he said, why is the tree growing? Oh, because it wants food. It wants sunlight. It wants water. He observed the plants are competing with each other. The banyan tree will not let the blade of grass grow. Oh my, the big tree doesn't let small things grow. Villain, hero, victim, immediately. But he says, why does it want food? Oh, because it wants food because it wants to stay alive. Why does it want to stay alive? Because it doesn't want to die. Why does it not want to die? Because it doesn't know what death is. It's frightened. Oh, fear. The tree is frightened. Animals are also running. Why are they running? Oh, they're not running randomly. They're not mad. They're running because some animals are running after food. They are running after pastures or prey. Other animals are running looking for food. Other animals are looking for mates. Why are they doing what they're doing? Because they want to stay alive. They don't want to die. Oh, they are also frightened. The plants are frightened. Animals are frightened. And he said, humans also frightened. That is why we are doing everything that we are doing. You want to achieve things. You want to do anything you want. Anything you want. You want to build a house? You're afraid of not having a house. You want a lover because you're afraid of being alone. Oh, humans also are frightened. We are all frightened. We are in this together. इसको कहते सब पशु हैं. Everybody is frightened. Who is not frightened? That must be God. And therefore the idea of God is constructed as someone who is not frightened and who doesn't frighten anybody. And therefore the idea of love emerges. Prema. And therefore, when you read the Vishnu Puran, the first avatar is of a fish. And the small fish will come to this man and say, save me from the big fish. No. Look at the story. The small fish is saying, and you're saying, wait a minute, in nature nobody will do that. But look at the idea. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. And the human being says, okay, I will save you. And you save the small fish. And when you save the small fish, you are a hero. Because now you have acted like God. You have saved someone. And then you take the little fish and put it in a small pot of water. And the next day when you wake up, the fish has become big and says, sorry, can you give me a bigger pot? And you are a human, you want to be a hero, right? So you make another big pot. And then when you get the big pot, you are like, now you'll be happy. Yes, the fish is happy for one day. On the next day it becomes bigger and a bigger pot. Then a bigger pot. Then a bigger pot. And finally no pots are good enough. So what does the human say? Okay, I'll put you in a pond. But then the pond is not good enough. I'll put you in a river. That is not good enough. Finally I put you in the sea. But even the sea is not good enough. And so the gods bring rain to fill the sea so that the fish can be accommodated. And it grows larger and larger and larger until suddenly the human discovers, oh my God, the earth is getting submerged by the waters to accommodate the fish. The act of kindness has become the act of stupidity. In saving the fish, I'm destroying myself. Does this sound like an environmental lesson? first chapter of Vishnu Puran, Matsya Avatar. It's good to be a hero. Be careful. Too much of heroism and you will create disaster. At one point, let the fish go back to the sea and fend for itself. You can't be taking care of them all their life. Like children who are desperate, want to be taken care of till a particular point in life. And then they have to go and leave the nest and fly away and live their own life. And if you don't, disaster will follow. It happens in so many families. We don't let go. You see, when you read the Samaveda is divided, is basically, Rig Veda is all about melodies. Rig Veda is all about hymns. So it's a whole set of poetry, very abstract poetry. And when you come to Samveda, the lyrics are given melodies. So the lyrics, Rig Veda is all about lyrics and Samveda is all about melodies. But the melodies are divided into two types. One is called the song of the settlement, song grama, a song of the grama, villages. The other is called the song of the forest, song of the aranya. There is a continuous conversation between the settlement and the forest. The settlement and the forest. The settlement and the... Why are they doing this? When you read, then later when you read the Ramayana, there's always reference to the forest. Ram goes to the forest. When you read the Mahabharata, it is always about the forest. The Pandavas are born in the forest, they're exiled in the forest. There is a constant communication with the forest. Because in the forest are the wild animals. And the wild animals will tell human beings the wisdom of life. And it is always there, and we just don't notice it, that all the animals are our teachers. Pashu hi guru hai. And how does it say? Look at let me give you an example. Let me give you 3 examples from the Mahabharata. In the Mahabharata, the Pandavas have gambled their kingdom. They've gambled their entire kingdom. And they're in the forest. The great Yudhishthira is in the forest. The great Bhima is in the forest. The great Arjuna is in the forest. And what happens in the forest? They encounter animals. And animals look at them and says, who are you? They say, we are the Pandavas. And I'm saying, what does it mean? We are the sons of Pandu. What does it mean? We are kings. What does it mean? We have kingdom. What does it mean? Because animals don't understand any of these concepts. These are artificial, man-made concepts created to make ourselves feel important. So look at the story of what happens to Hanuman. What happens to Bhima? Bhima is the strong, powerful man. And he says, I'm so strong, I'll walk straight, no obstacles in my road. I'll just keep walking straight. All trees will fall apart. Everything on my road will be broken. He keeps walking straight. He's proud of his strength until he stumbles upon an old monkey sleeping in the forest. And the old monkey says, who are you? He says, I'm Bhima. Move aside. Don't you know who I am? He says, no, sorry, I don't know. So he said, move aside. He says, well, I'd love to, but I can't. I'm old. I can't move. Can you just move my tail and just go ahead? I have no problem. And Bhima tries to kick the tail. Doesn't happen. Push the tail. Doesn't happen. Tries everything in his power, and that old monkey just doesn't move. Until he realizes something is going wrong. This is not an old monkey. And the old monkey says, well, I'm Hanuman. And you think you're very strong, but there's someone stronger than you. And suddenly the conversation is between the forest and the city. Because cities come and go, villages come and go, forest will always be there. Nature will always be there. Even if all human civilization disappears, nature will always be there. It is only human imagination imagines a time before nature. It's imagination. Prakriti hamesha hai. And there is Hanuman telling Bhima that don't be so proud. There is always something stronger than you. And then you have Arjun who goes into the forest. And then he meets a tribal person. And he has a fight with a tribal, a Kirata. And he's having a fight with the tribal person about who killed there is a pig which he shoots and there are 2 arrows on the pig. And he says, I shot it first. And the tribal person says, no, I also shot it. I shot it first. And they both arguing. He says, do you know who I am? And the tribal person says, no, who are you? He says, pata hai mera baap ka naam kya hai? Do you know who my father is? He says, I don't know, some human being only, no? So Arjun is suddenly shaken out of that. He thinks I'm a prince, I'm this great man, I'm this friend of Krishna, so I'm a special. And the forest says, you are not special. You are just a predator or a prey. That's it. That's what you are. Everything else is imagination. And forest is a great equalizer. And there's this great duel which is fought. Because in the animal kingdom, remember, there's no concept of property. There is only territory. The strongest wins. So the tribal man fights Arjuna. The tribal man wins. And says, well, this is mine. And he smiles, the tribal man, because he sheepishly, Arjun looks at him because he's been defeated. And of course we are told he's Shiva, so it's okay. But the fact is, why is the story being told? It is being told to make us aware of, in nature's eye, everybody is equal. Humans create hierarchy. We say this is better, this is worse. The idea is repeated again when in the Yaksha Prashna, one day the Pandavas go to a lake and there is water there. They want to drink that water. And there is a heron, a heron or a crane. This bird looks at them and says, you can't drink the water until you answer my question. If you drink the water without answering, you will die. And the Pandavas are humans and princes, arrogant. They drink water anyway. Who is going to stop them? They die. And then, of course, the heron goes and the story goes, and finally, of course, they are saved. But the point is, don't apply human rules to the animal kingdom. Don't think animals function by... we have this idea of saying the king of the jungle is a lion. Has anybody asked the lion? Nobody asks the lion. I always tell when does a lion roar? It only roars when it is frightened. It never roars to show off. It is frightened, it will roar so that the prey is so scared, it stands still and you're going to catch it. We don't realize, the animal world is a very different world. They're happy once they've eaten. When they're horny, they're horny. When they're not horny, they're not horny. It's just very simple, honest world, safe world, scary world. It's a vana. It's the forest, predator, prey, but humans. And that's what Pashu is all about. It's about these animals, and it is about fishes, and it's about birds. It's about animals. You see, well, Shiva may sit on Mount Kailas. Vishnu is also associated with animals. He's the preserver of the world. Shiva is the destroyer of the world. How does he destroy the world? By not being hungry. If I'm not hungry, why do I need to eat? If I don't need to eat, why do I need a job? If I don't need a job, what's the point of life? And Vishnu is the preserver of society. No, jobs are important. Because you have to do work. And why do you have to work? So that you can feed other people. You may not be hungry, but other people are hungry. Feed them. And look at the animals associated with Vishnu. He has got a snake. And he has a hawk. And again you have the predator and the prey. The Garuda, the hawk, and the coils of the serpent on which he sleeps. And when he is tired, Vishnu is tired, he sleeps on the coils of the serpent. When he wakes up, he has to do job and he has to travel. And where does he travel? He travels on the eagle. So he has to go to places while the snake is coiled. Look at the idea of stillness and movement. Another idea, the snake is Sarpadrishti. Sarpadrishti is what is called a worm's eye view. When you look at life from a tactical point of view, that will I get food today? Sarpadrishti. What in management is called tactical thinking. Aaj ka khana. And the bird, the Garuda, is about Garuda Drishti. Strategic thinking. Food for my entire life. Food for everybody. Not just my food today, not here and now, but always. It's a bigger viewpoint. Humans can shift between these two gaze. And therefore animals communicate ideas, short-term thinking, long-term thinking, narrow vision, wide vision. There is the animals talking to you. And you have the goddesses on different animals representing different ideas. And you have the goddess, one goddess sitting on, there is Ganga, the river Ganga on a dolphin. And Yamuna on a turtle. Why this? If you look at the river Ganga, you'll realize it is a bright, the waters are whiter, not anymore, but it's white rapids in the Ganga. So it looks white, bubbly, chirpy. But if you look at the Yamuna, the flow is sluggish. And so somebody saw it and said, oh, this goddess, the Ganga, is on a dolphin, leaping like the rapids. And look at poor Yamuna, sluggish, therefore the turtle. The imagery is created as adjectives, as qualifiers to ideas. And that is how this whole world is designed. I can go talking about so many animals, but I'd like to conclude with one story. It is my favorite story. And so let me just drink some water. And then we can have some questions. And it's my favorite story. So once upon a time, there was a conference of the gods, very much like the Jaipur Lit Festival. And all the gods in India travel on their animals, and they decided to come. And where do they come? They said, let's go to the most stable place on earth, of course, Mount Kailas, which is a mountain. And they all came in their respective vehicles. So Surya, the sun god, came on a stallion. Chandra, the moon god, came on an antelope. Ganga came on a dolphin. Yamuna came on a turtle. Brahma came on a goose. Vishnu came on a hawk. And when he arrived, like all, as you have seen everywhere in the world, the drivers have to wait outside and the masters have to go inside. So the gods went up the mountain, all the animals waited downstairs. And Garuda was waiting down, and he observed something very peculiar. What did he observe? He observed that when the gods were going to Mount Kailas, there is an entrance to Mount Kailas. And the entrance there's a ledge, and on the ledge there is a bird, and the bird is singing this beautiful song. And he was very happy to listen to the song, this sparrow chirping away happily, all the gods blessing it. And then something happened. The last of the gods to arrive was Yama, the god of death. And he came on a buffalo. He got down from his buffalo and he limped his way slowly but steadily up the mountain. When he stopped, when he heard the song of the bird, and he looked at that bird and sort of frowned and crinkled his forehead and was a little sort of disturbed, and he walked in a huff up the mountain. And Garuda saw this and said, oh my God, Yama does not like that song. He's going to kill the bird. Oh, poor bird. Let me save the bird. So he took the bird in the palm of his hands and he flew across the 7 rivers, across the 7 mountains, to a forest far away. And in the forest he found the hermitage of a sage, in which there was a mango tree. And on the mango tree were succulent mangoes. And he built a nest there, and he left the sparrow there and said, you'll be happy here, you'll be safe here. And he left very happily across the 7 mountains, across the 7 rivers, and returned to Mount Kailas. All fine. Conference came to an end, all the gods were leaving. So Surya left on his horse, and Chandra left on his antelope, and Ganga left on her dolphin, and Yamuna left on a turtle. Vishnu came down along with Yama, and when they reached the gates, Yama looked up at the ledge where the bird was supposed to be. There was no song, only silence. And Yama smiled, and he looked relieved. And Vishnu asked him, why are you looking so happy? He said, when I came here, there was a bird over here singing this wonderful song that I really loved. But I was a little disturbed. And Vishnu said, why? And Garuda listened carefully to this conversation, like all of us. And Yama said, in my books, I saw this bird. This bird is supposed to die today, but not here. It is supposed to die across the 7 mountains, across the 7 rivers. There is a mango tree under which there is a python waiting to eat the sparrow. And I was wondering how this little bird with his tiny wings could fly there. And this great Garuda, solved my problem. He is my savior. And right now, I can hear the python gulp. Look at the story. It is a children's story. Who is the hero? Who is the villain? Who is the victim? Who is the savior? Who is the martyr? Who is the good guy? Who is the bad guy? What is the story trying to communicate? Can you hear the animals chuckling because humans are being silly and imagining themselves as great people and forgetting that we all descend from the same father, Kashyapa, and we are just animals with imagination. Thank you. You take some questions? Yeah.
Good afternoon, sir. Sir, actually my question is not related to this conversation, but I had a question. Sir, why is the Kundalini represented as a snake?
Why is the Kundalini represented as a snake? Now, that's a complex question. One thing is because, see, you're talking about, snakes are very interesting. I always, when you see the cobra around Shiva's neck, you've seen a cobra around a neck, right? His neck. And I always ask the question, is the snake moving or still? What do you think? Answer the question. How do you know? We have seen the picture. Clever people. Observe carefully. Why have they selected the cobra? The cobra is a very interesting animal. When it is still, it has a hood. It cannot have the hood if it is not still. If it's moving, it cannot have the hood. So when you see the hood, it means stillness. But when the snake is copulating, it is moving. A snake, when it is copulating, it has to move. It intertwines itself into the double helix and forms this structure. So one is stillness and one is movement. So Kundalini is the idea is that you have human potential which is resting inside you. How do we visually represent it? It is the still serpent, awaiting to rise up like a double serpent. You are one serpent. Which is the other serpent? Your life, the world, Prakriti, the nature. You are engaging with the world like a serpent. You have to continuously dance with it. Only then will you get wisdom. That's what it means. Please keep Pashu questions, otherwise they'll feel neglected.
Hi, sir. Oh, over here.
Yes.
So you began and ended your session by talking about how we all come from the same father, Kashyapa. And yet, through most of the session, you also spoke about how Purush and Prakriti, there exists a clear duality, and how often, the animal world is not corrupt, but we corrupt it, and we have our artificial constructs and everything. So I was just wondering, in the Vedas or in your own interpretation, how is this reconciled? That we're all from the same father, and yet there's a very clear duality between humans specifically and the rest of the world.
Okay. First thing, remember, I love the word interpretation because there's nothing in the world but interpretation. Yeah. If somebody says they know the truth, you know you have met a liar. Or a mythologist. Yeah. So you decide. You don't want to judge, then it's mythologists. You want to judge, they're liars. So there's only interpretation. They're basically talking about an abstract concept. That is nature, basically the fundamental Indian idea. And I use the word Indian very specifically. I don't use the word Hindu because the same idea is there in Buddhism, same idea sort of in Jainism. It's there in this. The ideas which come from India focus on two divisions: nature and the human mind. Note the word human mind, not male mind or female mind. Human mind, which is imagination. So on one side you have imagination, on the other side you have nature. Nature is about hunger. Nature is about predator and prey. Nature is about fear. Nature is about survival. It is material. It is tangible. The imagination is nirgun. It has no, you can't measure it, you can't see it, you can't do anything with it. It can be whatever you want you to, it can be anything you want. You can say world without hunger, world with only hunger. In nature there is diversity. This is about singularity. This construct is what they're talking about in different languages. So they use different ways of explaining it. They'll say Purush, Prakriti, they'll say Kashyapa and the mothers. Typically in mythological language, imagination is associated with men and nature is associated with women. Now, I don't know whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, because men are mostly imagining things and women are grounded in reality. So, maybe that is the meaning or something else we don't know. We can get a patriarchal definition and a matriarchal definition. And I don't want to go into the politics where animals are concerned. Yeah, because ultimately wohi hai na, the peacock dancing. So, so that's, you have to understand it in that way. Yeah, that's what I mean. That's the duality. The fundamental duality is between nature and imagination. JLF has to decide which question. So you all decide. I am not taking the call.
Good morning.
Yes.
My mother is saying that हिंदू तो पूजा करते हैं और मानते हैं अच्छा है,
जी।
तो क्रिश्चियन हम सांप को और क्रिश्चियंस क्यों इनको गंदा मानते हैं और मारते क्यों हैं ये?
सब
So basically question is this: number one, we couldn't understand the tactical and strategic Sarpadrashti wala we couldn't understand. The second thing she wants to know, where lies the difference? What is that difference we need to confide in, like cow and snake in Christian mythology and Hindu mythology? So what to believe in? Where lies the difference?
Well,
the veracity.
See, bottom line is you believe in what makes you feel good about it. So believe in whatever makes you feel good about yourself. Yeah. Don't believe in what others say you should believe. That's the most dangerous thing to do. But the Sarpadrishti means, okay, school, boy goes to girl, boy. So I remember my school days. Do I study for today's exam or do I study for board exams which are coming from 2 years from today? Right? Which class to join? Tuition is for tomorrow's exam or after 2 years. So Sarpadrishti is today's exam. Garuda Drishti is exam after 2 years. Dur Drishti jisko kehte hain. Thinking ahead. Sarpadrishti is thinking here and now, and both are important. Humans can do it, animals can't do it. Animals don't have Dura Drishti. They only think of here and now. Humans have the ability, so that's one point. And across the world, every animal, different animals are given different values in different times. So some will say the cow is good, some will say the cow is not good, some will say the bull is good, some will say the bull is not good. The different words they use, but the problem is all animals are animals. All plants have not decided they're good or bad. Humans decide that they're good or bad. There's a story, there's a very famous, I don't have this song, I don't know who's written this. It's a Urdu poetry. And the Urdu poetry says, in the forest, there is a banana tree on one side and there is a berry tree on the other side. A banana tree has long, wide leaves and the berry leaf has these sharp thorns. And the wind blows and they sort of brush against each other and the banana leaf gets torn. And the poet says, who is the villain and who is the hero? Should I blame the banana leaf for having big leaves and standing in the way of the berry tree? Should I blame the berry tree for having such sharp thorns? Or should I blame the wind for making them dance together? And then the poet says, if I didn't exist, I don't think they would have thought about heroes, villains and victims. So, आदमी लोग सबको बुरा बनाते हैं और अच्छे बनाते हैं. पशु नहीं करता ऐसा.
So,
Yeah.
so I liked how we talked about humans having a savior complex and making somebody a predator or a prey and victim. But these movements that come around for environmental conservation or vegetarianism, are these just manifestations of that savior complex that we have, or is there really any truth to it?
Well, it's more than savior complex, it is survival complex. If we continue to do what we are doing right now, maybe we won't exist. People will exist, nature will exist, we won't exist. That's all it is. It's about the human desire to survive. कि भैया अगर तुम ऐसे ही, if you keep consuming and consuming and consuming and consuming like the big fish which is growing bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, then the world will come to an end. Whose world? Our world, not nature. Nature will continue. Nature dinosaur के टाइम भी था, उसके बाद भी रहेगा. That's why the yuga concept, right? There is some प्रलय के बाद भी दुनिया चलेगी. So we are trying to figure out a way, because at one level there's so much of consumption, so much of industrialization. We are trying hard, but we are not trying hard enough because it demands discipline. And discipline is not easy, no? Like I have to go to the gym every day. Look at me. Not. The lady there. Okay, there's two. I heard a voice also.
So, should I ask?
Let the lady ask, then the gentleman, wherever he is. So, yeah.
Hi. In Hindus, we believe that there is something called Nag Dosh.
Huh.
What is your view on this? And do we really pay for what our ancestors killed and we didn't even know about it?
That's a coping skill. Sometimes in life you go through very bad patch. I always tell people that those who say, oh, God doesn't exist, astrology doesn't exist, this is all rubbish and all that. Have you ever been in a sad situation where life is not working your way? Things are just not working out. You're not getting a job, you have a horrible boss, marriage is not working out, children are against you, ghar mein kala hai, and you're helpless. You don't know what to do. That's when religion starts playing a role. That's when astrology starts playing a role. That's when all this, because you just can't, rationality doesn't work at that time. Because people say, no, be patient. Sabar karo. Arey, sabar kitna karu? Upay batao. So Pandit ji gets frustrated, so they created something called Nag Dosh. So you're busy trying to solve it and maybe something will sort out itself. And they will say, oh, that was solved. Causality, we attribute causality to many, many things. We genuinely believe we are successful because we went to school. No. But I can't tell that to my children, no? Why are you successful? Lucky tha. But I can't tell that because then the child will say, मैं क्यों school जाऊँ? मैं भी luck के लिए pray करता हूँ. तो अभी आपको नाग दोष के बारे में बताना पड़ेगा उसको कि पढ़ो. In my days, I used to work so hard and all that. So we all create these stories of connections and all that. We need it because life is tough. Life is not predictable and everything is not rational. Like the peacock, we are dancing, no? We are dancing. Kabhi na kabhi to ladki dekhegi. Yeah.
Sir, you quoted Mahabharata while saying when Bhima was walking in the jungle and was proud about his strength, and you mentioned Arjuna and many mythologies. The thing I've noticed is at the end of it all comes down to God, and there's nothing powerful than God. But right now what we've discussed is that something is better than everything. So according to you, is there something better than God?
Well, you decide, no?
Sir, according to me, the G word in God, which to me means the generator, there's nothing can be better than this generator.
That's your truth. Live with it. Good for you. Last question.
Hello.
Yeah.
Okay. So I've been seeing this iconography linking snake with desire. I mean, so can you tell any stories, snakes and desire?
So you want about desire or snakes? Clarify.
Linking them both. Any stories?
I'm trying to think about it. The idea of this, we have this Bollywood romantic idea of the Nagin. You know, where they are seen as eternal couples, and there's always this story, and it's found in many mythologies really, of snakes being always together, which is not really true if you ask a zoologist or a natural historian. But they're always together, and this whole notion that if you kill the male serpent, then the female serpent, because now can transform into a human being, and she'll be this sexy babe, and she'll sort of come and seduce you, and guess what's going to happen when you get her? You know, the fangs will come out and she will take her great revenge and she will remember for generations. So this whole idea, it's more in the folk narratives, this whole idea of women getting married to snakes. There is this various Nagamandala plays, a very famous play Girish Karnad wrote about. It's from the Katha Sarit Sagar. And the story of this beautiful woman who is her husband doesn't love her. He has a mistress and he's always going. And then she goes to this witch and tells the witch that make me a magic potion that my husband will fall in love with me. And she gives it to the husband, and the husband just throws it out, and it falls in a snake pit. and a snake drinks it and falls in love with this beautiful woman, and she transforms exact replica of the husband and makes love to her every night, and so she's very happy, and the husband is wondering, why is she so happy? I'm with the mistress and she seems to be very happy. She must have a lover. And at night when he looks at the window and he suddenly sees someone looking just like him entering the house and making love to his wife, and she's having a great time, he feels jealous. Because he's not a great lover like that. And that's what snakes are. They are passionate, wonderful lovers in our imagination. Yeah? So that's what we must remember. And we all are looking for that wonderful snake. Okay.
Hi, thank you very much for this very enlightening session. Okay, my question is a rather broader question. It is, we have this amazing ethos in India, which is coming to the Purans and Vedas, etc. Now, how do we make it relevant in modern India? That is what my question is. I mean, as a contemporary author who's writing myths, that's a crucial question when we look at consumerism and we look at host of other problems that we are facing today. So how do we bring in this very indigenous ethos, which I think is not meant just for India but for the whole world, because it's well grounded in an understanding of human nature relationship. Okay. So what would you recommend?
Mythology is called Sanatan, which means timeless. It's all the wisdom is timeless, and timeless wisdom doesn't really need rescuing because it is timeless. It won't go away. It's always there. It's like oxygen. It's always going to be there. When you are in trouble, you will look at it. When you're not in trouble, you will not look at it. The point is we give modernity too much value. Whether you have an iPhone, iPad, internet, Wi-Fi, technology, video games, the bottom line is we are animals with imagination. That won't change whether you are modern or ancient. 1,000 years ago, we were animals with imagination. Today, we are animals with imagination. 1,000 years from today, we'll be animals with imagination. Which means, you see, a deer gets frightened when it can see a tiger, smell a tiger, or hear a tiger. Humans can imagine a tiger all the time. We are more frightened than you can possibly imagine, cell phones notwithstanding. And as long as there is fear, you will need the Puranas, you will need the Vedas, you will need mythology, because only stories take us away from fear. Thank you.